Today on Mostly Mets Monday, we're going to be wrapping up the Juan Soto news. We're going to be discussing the slow moving free agent and trade markets. We're also going to be talking about what the Mets need to do in terms of pitching and offense moving forward for the 2025 season. Please give me a like, give me a subscribe, and comment what you think the Mets' priority should be. With that said, let's get started. Welcome to the first episode of Mostly Mets Monday. I'm going to get right into it here. The first thing I want to talk about, I just want to wrap up the Soto news. Obviously, it's been about a week. We all know he's with the Mets. We're all happy about it. We have one of the best hitters in baseball. Be excited about it. Um, and the press conference didn't tell us anything. We didn't learn anything new. Um, yes, it's been spun that he loved the Mets and the organization and the family, and I think while that a lot of that's true, he took the most money. We all know that the money was the most important thing, especially having Scott Boras as your agent. You basically are always going to sign with whoever offers you the most money. That being said, he's here. Be happy. We love it. Um, but what I think we need to stop doing as Met fans is staying little brother basically on Twitter, right? We're arguing with Yankee fans. Let them talk. Let them say he's not that good. We wouldn't have paid that much. He's a clubhouse cancer. He's this. Who cares? Let them talk. Let them talk to themselves. We'll move on with our off season because I think that's the most important thing now. We're not a complete team. Yes, we have Soto. We have something to build around, but this is not a World Series contending team right now. They're right. This isn't. Our pitching is bad. Uh, we need to do more to improve it. We need another bat. So let them talk. Let them do their thing. Don't argue with them. Who cares? They're coping because they lost one of the best players in baseball to their crosstown. I wouldn't say rival. I don't consider Mets and Yankees a rivalry really. It's becoming one now because we took a player from them and they don't know how to act. It's never happened to them before. But moving on from that, um, I'm seeing a lot of talk from Mets fans that they're angry that Stearns is not making more moves and Stearns isn't doing his job and we don't want Stearns and fire Stearns. Come on. It's ridiculous. The offseason just started. The winter meetings aren't the end of the offseason, they're the beginning. Think of all the moves that happened, right? The Mets getting Soto, Crochet to the Red Sox, the Yankees signing Max Fried. It all happened at the winter meetings. But nothing's happened since. The winter meetings ended, 4 or 5 days ago. Nothing's happened since. You hear a lot of rumors, you hear a lot of talk. That's because at the winter meetings, you're kind of setting up what your plan is for the offseason. You're there meeting with teams, right? You're having initial discussions. These discussions for trades and when you're talking to agents, these contract offers, they're not split second decisions. You're gathering information, you're starting the dialogue. You could be talking to a team at the winter meetings about a trade and the trade doesn't happen until January because they're also fielding offers from other teams. They're discussing with other teams. They might come to you and say, "Hey, we have an offer from Cleveland and they want to give us this guy and this guy and they're going to throw in some money." And then you say, "Hold on, let us think." And then you come back a couple days later and say, "Okay, well, we're willing to do this guy." It's a slow moving process. Do trades come together quickly sometimes? Absolutely, but that's when a guy doesn't really have a market elsewhere or one team just offers a haul and gets their guy. It's a little easier at the winter meetings because everyone's in the same place. You can go to a restaurant and discuss it. You can meet with a player's agent and discuss the contract in person right then and there. Now you're working the phones. Maybe I'll fly out and meet you. We'll discuss it in person. But most of the time, it's happening over phone. It's happening over the course of a couple weeks to a month, or as quickly as a couple days. The market is not moving right now. So to sit here and say, "Oh, Stearns isn't doing his job. He sucks. Get rid of him," guys, it's the beginning. This isn't the NBA. This isn't the NFL that all happens in one day and everyone's signed and Everyone knows what their team's going to be. Baseball's different. And the offseason also, it changes, right? Maybe the Mets were in discussions with guys, and then because they thought they were out on Soto, and then they get Soto, and then they're like, well, maybe we don't want to sign Corbin Burns. Maybe we don't want to sign Max Fried. Maybe we don't want to sit at the top of the market in every position because you can't. You can't pay everyone $30 million a year. You just can't. You can't build a team that way. So take it a little easier. There's no. It's not instant. It's not going to happen overnight. I know we're all excited because we got Soto and we don't want to waste it. We don't want to lose out on all the pitchers. Who's gone? Nobody's gone. Max Fried's the only pitcher, and Luis Severino are the only two pitchers that have really been signed that are any decent pitchers. Garrett Crochet was traded for. I don't think the Mets were ever getting Garrett Crochet. The Red Sox could offer a way better prospects for him. Now that you look back on it, at the time I was excited. I wanted Garrett Crochet, but the Red Sox had the better prospects. You weren't going to be able to compete with them. They didn't even give up their top guys, and they still have way better prospects than we do. So take it easy, relax. It will happen. Moves will be made. This isn't the team that we're going to go into spring training with. We will sign pitchers. We will get another bat. Um, I know it's coming. It's David Stearns is patient, and you should be patient too. I know it's hard. I feel the same way. I want moves to happen today. I want to know what the team is going to be going into spring training, but we're not going to know that. Maybe for another month, maybe for 2 months. So let's take it easy. We got a long way to go, and you know we'll get through it. We'll feel a good team. You don't get Juan Soto and then just say, oh, we'll just bring a bunch of young guys up and have them play. No, that's not what Soto's here for. You're gonna go for it if you bring in a guy like that, and you have Lindor, um, and you have a guy who you think is a young budding superstar in Vientos. Like you have Nimmo who's getting older. Like this is kind of your window right now. Your next, 4 years or so. Like you have a window, so they're gonna be going for it. That's what I wanted to discuss about that whole situation. Next, what I want to get into is what the options are for a bat to protect Juan Soto in the lineup. Obviously, the guy that all the Mets fans we want back, is Pete Alonso. He's been a great Met. He's a career Met. He was drafted by us, brought up through our farm system, is probably a year away from breaking the home run record for the Mets. So, in our hearts, yeah, we all want him back. The problem is, I don't think that the Mets organization views him the same way that we do, or baseball in general views him the same way we do. There's a lot of reports out there that he really has no market right now. That um, there's a lot of smoke, but no real fire. There's not a lot of teams who are really bidding for him. Nobody's really putting in offers. Nobody. It's because the Mets and Major League Baseball views him as a one-dimensional player. He's a home run hitter, a prolific one. He's a great home run hitter. He will, if he stays until Soto breaks it, have the home run record and for the Mets. And I think there's a lot of feelings that we want him back. And I think there's a lot of it makes baseball sense too. Soto needs protection in the lineup. He needs someone who the pitchers fear behind him. Right now, they don't have that. Yes, Vientos could turn into a great power hitter, but we don't know what he is. Yes, he had basically a half a great season and a great playoff. Does that mean he's going to be an all-star or a superstar moving forward? I don't know. We don't you don't know. It's not a sure thing. Do we all think so? Yes. But do we know so? No. You don't He has no track record. He hasn't proven anything. Your second year is where you really prove yourself. A lot of guys struggle in their second year. Um, Sophomore slump, he could very well pitchers start to figure you out and they see the holes in your swing and they know how to pitch to you. You don't want a guy like that hitting behind Soto. Doesn't mean that he's done if he has a bad year. It just means that now he has to work harder to figure out what they're doing to him and how to fix his swing. Get rid of that hole in his swing. But you don't want him doing that and learning how to do that, protecting Juan Soto in the lineup. Because What pitchers are going to do? They're just going to walk Soto, put him on first base. You'd rather have him standing on first base where he's not a threat to steal and not a threat to be a great base runner, and just pitch to Vientos, strike him out. So you need someone behind him who can protect him, and I think that's Pete. Yes, he's declined, right? They see him as a declining player. He didn't hit. He has worst season last year. He had 34 home runs, which would be a great worst season for most players. But you can start to see maybe the decline a little bit. Could he turn that around? Absolutely, and he might have just had a bad year. I think in his biggest problem was worrying about the contract. He was trying to be the hero. He was trying to be the best hitter he could be. And sometimes when you do that, you end up being worse because you're pressing. He was pressing all year. You could tell, even in the clutch, where he hasn't been bad in the clutch his whole career. But last year he was terrible in the clutch until it came to the playoffs. And I think that's because in the playoffs, everyone's pressing. The pitcher's pressing. Every hitter is pressing. Your fielders are everyone's pressing because it's the playoffs and it's important. The only team that doesn't is the Dodgers, and that's because they've been there so much. So I still think Pete is the best option for us. He would give so much protection in that lineup because yes, is Pete Alonso as good a hitter as Juan Soto? No, absolutely not. But you have to fear and respect his ability to take any pitch you throw and hit it 450 feet. He is that kind of power hitter. Even if you make a good pitch, he can hit it. So I think he's the best option. I don't think the Mets think he's the best option. What I think the Mets are doing is they're slow playing Pete Alonso. They know that he doesn't really have a market right now. They know that they don't have to outbid anyone for him. They're waiting him out. They're waiting Scott Boras out because Scott Boras doesn't want to have free agents signing in spring training like he did last year. It ruined their seasons. It made them fire Scott Boras. Montgomery fired Scott Boras because of what happened. He's not going to want to do that again. So as maybe we get into January, and I know we hate to hear that, we want to have an answer before January, but I think as we get into January, Scott Boras and Pete Alonso are going to be looking at each other saying, "We need to get you on a team. We need to make sure that you're on a team." And Pete Alonso is going to say, "I love the Mets. I want to go back to the Mets. What are the Mets offering?" And Scott Boras is going to come to the Mets and say, "Hey, listen, I know maybe we're not going to get the 5 or 6 year deal we wanted. Can we do 2 years at high AAV, $30 million a year for 2 years, 2 years, 60 million, or 1 year with an option for a second year?" I think I think the Mets that's something the Mets would jump at. I just don't think they want to give him a long term deal. He doesn't. You don't want to have Stanton and Pete Alonso become Stanton with the Mets as Stanton is with the Yankees. Just because I don't think those big sluggers age as well. They just don't. They're always going to be able to hit home runs, but they become worse on the bases. They become worse defensively. I think Pete eventually will be a DH in a year or two. I think he'll have to. No, I think his defense isn't as bad as people say, but it's not good either. It's middle to below average. He's a great scooper. He saves a lot of errors for Lindor and Vientos and all those guys. He's a great scooper, but his ability to play the position, it's under par or over par, however you want to say it. The next option, which is one that I am strongly against, is Alex Bregman. I think Alex Bregman's a Gold Glove caliber third baseman, but he's a declining hitter. Last year he hit 19 home runs and 60, I think it was 62 or 68 RBIs. He's just not he's not the feared hitter that you need to hit behind Soto. He's not. No pitcher in the world fears Alex Bregman. He's a good hitter. He's a scrappy guy. He's gonna pop a couple home runs. He's gonna play Gold Glove caliber third base. But that also involves moving Vientos to first base. And I think Vientos is kind of an insecure player in that way. Not that I think he's whatever. He's maybe insecure is the wrong word. I think that he's been through so much with the Mets organization of being a big prospect to then not being a big prospect and then getting called up and then getting sent down and then signing JD Martinez to replace him as the DH. Moving him to first base after he's worked very hard at his third base defense. Now, he's not a good third baseman. He's never going to be. He has a very strong arm. He has a good arm. but his defense, it's a lot like Pete. He can make the plays, but you kind of wince when he makes them, and you don't know. I just don't. But I think moving him to first base kills his confidence a little bit after he's worked so hard. Now you're going to make him learn a new position. So I don't think Bregman fits on this team. I know there's a lot of talk about Bregman to the Mets. I don't think it's real. I would highly doubt that it's real. I don't think Stearns wants to give a guy like that a 7 year deal. I don't. If he does, I think he's crazy. Maybe the advanced metrics say something different or whatever, but just by the eye test, he's not the same player he was. He hasn't been the same player since they were cheating years ago. I just don't think he's the same guy. If they got him, okay, it makes the lineup a little bit deeper, gives you better defense. I don't see it as the move that makes you a real World Series contender. I think Pete Alonso does, oddly enough. Pete Alonso, it probably isn't an overall as good a player as Bregman, but he fits the need better. So I hope Bregman's not real, but I think that's one that I would stay away from. I don't think it is real only because I think Boris knows and Bregman knows where he wants to go, and I think the Mets and their money are being used as a ploy almost. Like, hey, I don't know, maybe the Mets are interested. He's leaking stories to reporters. Hey, listen, Mets are interested in this guy, and you know how the Mets have money, so maybe, hey, Yankees, I don't know if you're interested. Maybe you pony up a little bit more. Maybe you pay a little bit more. Or Astros, you want him to come back. It's going to cost you this much. I know you have a deal at 150 million. Maybe that needs to be 180 million. Yeah, I think that it's a lot of that going on, which is also what I think is going on with Pete Alonso and the Yankees. I don't think the Yankees have any interest in Pete Alonso. They don't want a right-handed power bat. They have that in Aaron Judge. They need a left-handed guy. They would love a left-handed hitting first baseman or a center fielder. You know, Cody Bellinger is perfect for the Dodgers. I mean, for the Yankees. Cody Bellinger is who the Yankees need to get. He has the perfect swing for that ballpark. I think he'll be great with the Yankees. I think that's who they need to get. But this isn't a Yankee talk, but that would be the perfect pickup for the Yankees. And that's who they want. They don't want Pete Alonso. They want Cody Bellinger. Pete Alonso wants to be back on the Mets. Boris knows that, so he's trying to drive up the price for the Mets by saying he wants to go to Yankees. I don't think it's going to work on Stearns. I think he's willing to wait as long as he has to. Um, so we'll see. Please just don't get Bregman. I don't want Bregman. I put him in the same category as like a Nolan Arenado, a guy who's kind of on the decline, still plays great third base. I don't know what you're going to get out of him. I'd rather have Arenado at this point because you don't have to, the Cardinals will pay down some of his money, and he only has, I think, 3 years left or 4 years left on his deal. Bregman, you're going to have to give 6 or 7 years. I don't want any part of that. I just think he's going to decline. He's going to be one of those players that we hate as fans. We'll love the signing because, hey, we got Bregman and he's a big name, but he's not the same guy. The last guy I want to talk about is the pipe dream. It's probably not going to happen. Um, but Vladimir Guerrero Jr., I think he would be the perfect move. Um, Probably not. He has a lot of power, but he doesn't hit for as much power as like Pete Alonso. But he has the ability to, and he's young. He's only I think 25 or 26 years old. So pairing or grouping him in with Soto, if you were able to get those guys and sign Guerrero long term, and then maybe have him here for 10 years, you're talking about the next 10 years with a middle of the lineup of two young guys who are already superstars in Soto and Guerrero, and then you add in Lindor to that for the next 5 or 6 years of him being a good player. That's a great core. That's the move if you're really going for it. If you really want to be a real contender, your lineup. If you get Guerrero, if you get Vladdy, you're competing with the Dodgers for the best lineup. Like you think about it, Lindor, Soto, Vladdy, Vientos, Nimmo, Alvarez. I mean, that's a great lineup. I don't care who else is hitting behind them. That's a great lineup that rivals the Dodgers. I don't think it's going to happen because the amount of prospects you'll have to give up for what's really going to be a rental, right? Vladdy just he turned down a contract extension from the Blue Jays. I think it was like $400 million, $430 million, something like that. So he wants to go to free agency. Um, and I don't think he's going to sign an extension if you bring him here. I think he's going to want to go to free agency, and you're going to have to give up a lot of prospects for a guy who's going to be a 1 year rental. You're going to be giving up Jet Williams and Sproat, and then other lower level prospects. Um, Personally, would I do it? Probably, because I'm not a prospect hugger. I don't think you hold on to prospects, so you don't know what they're going to be. You know what Vladdy is. You know what he is and what he's going to be. He had one down year a couple years ago, but last year I think he hit 320 with 30 home runs and over 100 RBIs. That's the guy you want. If you can't get him, then you switch to Pete, right? And I think you make the call on Vladdy. You ask Toronto, hey, what do you want? What are you willing to trade him? What do you want to do? If they say, hey, we want your top five prospects for him, then no, you move away because for a 1 year rental you can't do that. But if you can get him, and maybe you say, hey, we'll do that, but we want the opportunity. We want 48 hours to speak to him to sign an extension before we make the trade. And if we can't do that, then we're backing out of the trade. That could be something that could work. I just don't think that. I think he's going to go to free agency. He wants to see how much he can get. He might get $500 million. Maybe Stearns says, I don't want to check in because I'll just pay him next year instead of trading all these prospects. I'll just sign him next year. Or maybe at the All Star break, the Blue Jays are out of it and they're looking to trade then, and maybe I can make the deal then. Maybe I don't get Pete and we sign Bregman and put Vientos at first. Maybe All Star break, Vladdy's available, then we'll get him then. I don't think Vlad's a probable thing, but I think it's an interesting thing that hey, it seems too smart on paper not to at least consider it. But we'll see. Out of the hitters, I think the most likely, I would say it's probably a 50% chance that they sign 50 to 60% chance they sign Alonso, and then probably Vlad 5%, and then Bregman takes up the other 30 or 40%, um, 35 40%. I think that's kind of the route it's going to go, but we'll see. Maybe there's someone we're not even thinking of. Maybe there's a bat that someone's trying to trade, and I heard a lot about Byron Buxton. That's kind of an interesting thing too. If the Twins are looking to move some of their more expensive pieces, you've heard about Correa. I've heard some noise about Byron Buxton. He'd be interesting because he's one of the best players in baseball. He really is. He's one of the top guys that nobody really talks about, and the reason he doesn't get talked about at that level is because he's always hurt. He can't stay on the field. If he could ever stay on the field, that guy would be a superstar. He just doesn't. Um, that's not something I expect to happen. It's just an interesting name that I heard. It would be interesting to think about if you didn't have to give up too much. But all right, the next and last thing that I would like to get into is the pitching options for the Mets. Obviously, we know that's the biggest need right now. We could get by if we don't get another bat. I would rather get another bat, and we should get another bat, but pitching we're struggling with right now, both in the starting rotation and the relieving market. Um, First, I want to go through a couple of the very, in my opinion, unlikely targets that the Mets have. The first one is the only true ace left on the market, and that's Corbin Burns. I think he's the only ace that was ever on the market, really. I don't see Fried as an ace necessarily. Um, Corbin Burns is going to get 8, 9, 10 years, probably a 30 or close to it AAV. That doesn't fit in the Mets' plans. They don't do that. David Stearns is not going to give that long of a contract with that high of a number to a pitcher who's over 30, or right, he'll be 31, I guess, in opening day. Especially one that has declined the last couple years. Not that he's not still a great pitcher. He's just, I don't think you can project him as being a number one pitcher for more than the next 3 or 4 years at the most. His velocity has declined. That's concerning. Could he still be a great pitcher with lower velocity? Sure, but it's much more rare, especially in today's game. There's not too many soft tossers who pitch at the front end of a rotation. Those are more back end of the rotation kind of guys. So I think the concern with him is, yeah, we give him 9 years and we get three top level years. You're paying him for what he did, not what he's going to do. He was great last year for the Orioles, but his numbers were down in terms of velocity. I think the Freed contract really screwed up other teams for Burns because I think maybe that's around what they were thinking of giving for Burns, and Burns is a better player, so now he's going to want more. The Mets aren't going to do that. I know that he's the last true option that would just cost money to go out and get, or maybe even through a trade. I don't know how many trades are really out there to be had right now for guys at the front of the rotation, but they're not going to touch him. I just don't see it happening. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's not in their philosophy. They have no interest in Corbin Burns. The next guy who is real front end of the rotation kind of guy, but I think is unlikely, is Framber Valdez. He's a very good pitcher. He's not a hard thrower. He's a get you out any way he can kind of ground ball pitcher, which with the Mets infield defense could be a good thing. At least with Lindor at shortstop. But I just don't think the Astros are really that interested in trading him. He's kind of the part of the core of that team. You'd have to give up a lot to get him because I think he has another year or two of control. So you'd have to give up a lot to get him. And I think while the Astros are talking about trading away pieces, I don't think other than Tucker, they're going to be trading other pieces. I think that they traded Tucker because they knew they weren't going to have the money to sign him back, and they figured let's get what we can for him. And they got a pretty good deal from the Cubs. So I think trading him was more of that. Like let's get what we can for him. He's not going to be here a year from now, so let's just get what we can and move on. Which is why I still think they're kind of in the mix for Bregman because Bregman's a much lower contract kind of guy, much lower AAV at least, and he's been there forever. I think a reunion there would be good for both sides, but I just don't see the Mets putting together a package for Valdez that's going to make the Astros bite. I think that, like they said, they're listening for offers, but they're not necessarily thinking about accepting any offers. You'll have to blow them away. And I just don't think he's the kind of pitcher that you would blow them away for. Um, Good pitcher, very good pitcher, would be great, very consistent, but I just don't see them giving up top prospects to get him, and that's what it's going to take. So that's another. Those two are very unlikely in my opinion. Um, Now I'll go into the free agent pitchers that I think are pretty likely, and that's the one guy who all Met fans have a soft spot in their heart for is Sean Manaea. He was a guy who signed last year. We were kind of upset that they signed him. It seemed like a low end signing, much like the Frankie Montas or the Clay Holmes signings this year. We didn't think much of it. Like, what are we going to get out of him? But he surprised a lot of people. He kind of came into his own. He changed his arm slot. He became a different pitcher basically in the second half of last year. He kind of wore down in the playoffs. Not his fault. He never pitched that much in his life. He wasn't able to continue, and he was still pretty good in the playoffs. Just as it got longer, you could tell he was gassed. But we all want him back, right? I'm kind of starting to get under the impression that I don't really want him back because I think it precludes us from going after anyone else. I think if we sign Manaea, the pitching staff is what it is. I think we're going to go into next season with Senga as our number one and Manaea as our number two, and then Peterson and Clay Holmes and Frankie Montas and maybe Tyler McGill. I think it will be a six-man rotation. I don't think he's the needle mover. I don't think he's the one that gets us into World Series contention. I think if you sign Manaea, you still look at the staff and there's a lot of question marks. So I just don't think that he would be my preference at this point. It hurts me to even say that because I think he will still be good, and I think he did find something and unlock something. But I can't have our rotation being Sean Manaea as our number two guy. I just don't think it's feasible. Like I just I don't think you're going anywhere with that. Could you win the division? Yeah, if you put together a great offense and maybe you sign Pete back and you have a prolific offense, could the pitching get by? Then maybe you go out and sign a bunch of guys in the bullpen and have this elite bullpen. Sure, but I don't see it raising our World Series aspirations. It just doesn't. I think it keeps them right where they are, where we're kind of in the mix, but not a favorite or not competing really with the Dodgers. I think if you sign Manaea, you're gonna get to an NLCS and lose to the Dodgers. That's what I think is gonna happen. So while it pains me to say it, I think it's the route that they shouldn't go. But what I think they're doing with Manaea is it's the same thing they're doing with Pete. He has the same agent. They're both Boris clients. They're slow playing it. They're saying, "Yep, go out there and get your best offer. Let go sign with someone else." Knowing that he wants to be back with the Mets. He wants to come back. They're they're going to let him go out and explore what he has and see what he can get. And maybe I think Severino kind of ruined the market because the A's gave him so much money in 4 years or 3 years that what's Manaea going to get? Manaea is better. So I think that if there's another team that jumps in and is aggressively going after Manaea, the Mets they're not going to get into a bidding war. They're going to let him go out and they're going to let him find his offers, see what he can get. And if he doesn't get what he wants, I think in a month from now, they're going to come back to the Mets and say, "Hey, can we do a 2-year deal at a higher AAV? Let's do 25. Let's do 2 years, 50 million." And I think the Mets would jump on that for what pitchers are going for. If you only have to do, even if it's a mistake, you only have 2 years. Even if he's not even if he becomes what he was his whole career instead of what he was second half, it's only 2 years. You can eat that money. You can even DFA him, or maybe it's 1 year with an option for a second year. That's what I think the Mets are hoping for with both Manaea and Pete. They're hoping that his market just falls apart, and they have to come back to the Mets and say, "Hey, let's do 2 years. Let's just get this done. He wants to come back." I think that's what they're doing. If we're going to go after one realistic starting pitcher, and that is it for our rotation, I think it has to be Walker Bueller because he is the type of guy who has a higher ceiling than Manaea. He's looking for a short term deal because he had a bad year last year. But you could see once it got to the playoffs, he turned into closer to what we're used to seeing with Walker Bueller. He's always been a good playoff performer, but he also spent all of last year recovering from an injury that sidelined him for a while. So maybe by the time the playoffs rolled around, he was healthy again. He felt good. He was stretched out. He was ready to go. So I think that if you get Bueller, it's going to be a short term deal. It's probably going to be 1 year with an option because he's going to try to test the market again next year if he has a good year. And if he doesn't have a good year, he's going to pick up that option you have him for 2 years. And it's not going to be a lot of money just because like I said, coming off a bad year and an injury, I don't think you have to pay him that much. But his ceiling is much higher. He has the ability to be a high end starting pitcher. I think Manaea, his ceiling is like a good number 2 or 3 starter, where Bueller as I think it's unlikely, but I think he still has the ability to be a number one or number two, either a number one or a high end number two starter. So I think, like I said, his ceiling is much higher than Manaea. There's more risk in it because he might just be the guy he was last year. Maybe the playoffs were an aberration, and after his injury history and everything, he just can't be that guy again. But I think at worst, he's a back end of the rotation pitcher. Manaea at worst turns into what he was before, and he shouldn't even be pitching. He should be a reliever or whatever. So that's the signing I'd rather make if we're talking about getting one more pitcher. Now, in terms of the trade market, after Crochet, he was the big fish on the pitching market. I didn't. I was hoping the Mets could swing a trade for him, but the Red Sox just had too much talent. They have too much minor league talent. They have so many young players. They were going to make that deal no matter what. If they wanted him, they could get him, and they obviously wanted him because they gave up pretty good prospects. It wasn't their top guys though, but even their mid-range prospects are still probably as good, if not better, than the Mets' top prospects. So they had the ammunition to go get him. We didn't. But I think the target that we all really should want is Luis Castillo. He is a guy who is very consistent. He's not a blow you away pitcher anymore. He was for a couple years when he was with the Reds, but he's a very consistent top end of the rotation guy. He's a mid threes ERA. He gets some strikeouts. He doesn't walk a ton. He gives up home runs. That's a big thing because he gives up home runs on his secondary pitches. But his fastball is still up there, I think in the 75th or 80th percentile on Baseball Savant. He still throws 96 miles an hour average fastball. So he could still throw hard, even at 33 years old. He's also under control for the next 3 years at like $22.5 million a year with an option for a fourth. And for a guy of his caliber, that's not a lot of money. That's one of those contracts that they're doing pretty well on. They're getting their money's worth out of that. And I think the Mets would like that, have that under control for another 3 years. That's probably more the route that Stearns would like to go. It's not a long term deal. He's under contract till he's 36, 37 in that area. And maybe you just get a couple consistent good years out of him where, yeah, maybe he's not an ace, but he can be your number one. He can be, with Senga, you know, he can be a front end of the rotation kind of guy for the next 3 years. And I don't think he'd cost much to get. If you're willing to take on his salary, I don't think you really have to give up much at all. I think maybe it's a McNeil and a couple smaller prospects for him to kind of, if you want not to take on all the money, you add McNeil in the deal. But if you want to take on all the money, you probably don't have to give up much of anything. A couple lower level prospects. Um, and they did say they want major league ready talent, so maybe like a Brett Beatty, but I don't see Brett Beatty being involved in any deals for any big players. So if you give up maybe a Brett Beatty, a lower level prospect, and a McNeil, I think it probably gets it done. They can slot McNeil right in, Beatty right in, and still get another prospect, and then you're taking the rest of the contract on. I think that's a route they might go. Um, I think that would be the overall option for the Mets right now in terms of pitching. Um, I think he's the closest thing to an ace that you're going to get in the pitching market right now. And I think that the free agent pitchers are just too expensive. The top end free agent guys. I think if you're going Walker Bueller or Sean Manaea, it's not going to be that expensive, but they're not the same level. They're not necessarily top level. Even Bueller could be. So yeah, I think that's really it in pitching. Other than I saw some rumors that they were talking to Griffin Canning. I don't want another project. We don't need another project here. Stearns, you got your project guys. You got Clay Holmes. You got Frankie Montas. You're going to try to fix them. You're going to turn Holmes into a starter, which I actually like. I like the Holmes deal. A lot of people are, the Yankee fans, you took our best reliever, our worst reliever, and making him your number two starter. He profiles as a starter. He has 4 pitches that he throws consistently. He's a sinker ball pitcher. He profiles as a starter. So turning him into a starter isn't the worst thing in the world. And you paid what, $13 million a year for him. So worst case scenario, he's your number 5 starter at $13 million a year. That's nothing. Or you put him back in the bullpen if he can't start, and you have a quality back end late inning reliever. The Yankee fans want to say he's the worst. He was your closer for a while. Like, he's not the worst pitcher you had. Sorry, he's just not. Um, his problem is the walks, and as a reliever, that doesn't profile well when you walk a lot of guys. But as a starter, if you walk a guy and you're a sinker ball pitcher, you can get a double play. If you have good defense behind you, he didn't have good defense behind him with the Yankees. So yeah, you give up a leadoff walk, and then you get a batter to hit into a double play ball, and they don't turn the double play. Well, that's just bad defense, right? I don't know. I just I can't stand that. I think it's actually a good move. I think it really is. I think Clay Holmes was a good move. Montas, we'll see if they can turn him into a reliable starter again. I think his ceiling, even at his best, he's probably a number three starter. But all right. Anyway, that's really all I had to go over today. Obviously, there's a lot more rumors going around. You got to be really careful of who you're listening to, unless it comes from the big guys. You know who they are, passing and those kind of guys. If they work for the Athletic or ESPN or MLB, then you know that they're real deal. These small Twitter accounts that just say they're close to signing this guy and they're trading for this guy. Don't listen to that. They don't actually know anything. I don't claim to know anything. I just go off of what I hear. I have no sources. So yeah, that's all I really wanted to go over today. Slow week overall after the Soto signing. That was 8 days ago, and it's been slow since then. But you have to understand that that's how these things move. Um, but yeah, let me know in the comments if you think that anything I said was wrong or right, or you think we should go a different route, or maybe there's someone I'm not even thinking about that you're hearing a rumor about that you want to talk about in another video. Please put it in the comments. Like the video, subscribe if you're still here, please. And yeah, until next time, let's go Mets.